and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And this week, the United States Supreme Court discusses whether or not to take some same-sex marriage cases, and Attorney General Eric Holder says the U.S. is ready for marriage equality.
I guess we'll see. Meanwhile, Gay and Lesbian Advocates and Defenders, the Boston legal group, sues the Social Security Administration for continuing to withhold survivor benefits from some same-sex spouses.
The United Nations Human Rights Council passes a resolution to combat anti-LGBT discrimination and violence.
And the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has stepped in and used the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to sue employers in Michigan and Florida for anti-transgender discrimination.
California Governor Jerry Brown signs a slew of LGBT-related legislation.
I guess that's the term now, a slew of legislation. The LGBT fight against Facebook's insistence that we use our real names precipitates some LGBT flight from Facebook.
An alarming report from the CDC on how half of gay and bisexual men with HIV are not taking the drugs to control it.
But an AIDS drug is showing some promise in treating Ebola.
And we're going to review the news. Well, you're going to review the new Sylvester musical. I'm going to review Mia Farrow and Brian Dennehy in Love Letters. And we are going to review James Earl Jones et al. in You Can't Take It With You. Now, that sounds like a pretty interesting show. But, you know, some people have started to watch us because of The Soup. Which is
well,
and go ahead.
First, we'll get to the viewer comment. Okay. I think we need to make peace with Joel McHale. He was angry at us for charging him with spending time on celebrities when he's mad at us for outing celebrities, or reporting on them, as we like to say. So I will give a small apology to Joel McHale for mischaracterizing his show as being all about celebrities.
What is a small apology? An apologette?
I think so. What I should have done is bring in a Hello Kitty doll to fulfill his definition of us as Japanese.
Right.
I may get around to that.
And we are grateful to The Soup. Actually, I'm going to be grateful for soup tonight because it's the only thing I'm allowed to eat today. Clear soup, because I'm having a colonoscopy tomorrow. And, you know, it's good to be open about these things. I'm 60 years old, about to turn 61. It'll be my second. But going back to The Soup.
Is this going to end up on The Soup?
I don't know.
Maybe.
Going back to The Soup.
Yes.
So this person writes me and says, well, I found out about your show, a woman. She says, for watching The Soup, so I tuned in and looked at your show. It's boring.
No appreciation for the witty repartee about Supreme Court writs of certiorari.
I admit that some of our stuff is a little arcane, you know, and you can look up that word in your Funkin' Wagnalls, but, you know.
Well, we like to think we provide a unique service of not talking about the Kardashians all the time.
To a sophisticated audience.
Of course. Flatter them. Maybe they'll stop calling us boring.
Okay.
But we are old.
All right.
All right, well, let's start with that Supreme Court news.
So, on Monday, September 29th, the Supreme Court had their conference. This is a private meeting. We don't know what happened, but we do know that among the things they were supposed to discuss were 7 same-sex marriage cases from 5 states. Is that basically? 4 states.
5.
Okay.
5 states, 7 cases, yes.
Okay. So now, if they had decided something, it's possible we would have known by now or maybe on Monday.
Well,
deciding whether to take cases is the big issue here.
Well, and reject them, because that would get rid of the stays on marriage in those states. So what we did learn was that when they decide not to take cases, they announce that a week after the conference. So keep an eye on this coming Monday for announcements from the Supreme Court on whether they are rejecting some of those cases, because that would allow marriage, same-sex marriage, to become legal in those states immediately.
And possibly in those whole circuits.
Because they are rejecting the appeals of the decisions that gave us same-sex marriage ostensibly in those states.
They're saying we're not going to hear them, we're just going to let these lower court rulings stand.
Exactly, and you're right. So if they do that in the 10th Circuit, which is Oklahoma and Utah, the cases that are coming from there, then it would make same-sex marriage legal in that circuit, because it was a circuit court decision, and that would expand marriage rights automatically to Colorado and any other states in that circuit. Maybe Wyoming? I don't know. I don't
Check
have the
your
list.
Circuits.
Check the list of states in your circuit.
Find out what circuit you're in.
So that's one thing that could happen immediately. They could announce at any point that they are taking some of those cases, or one of those cases, or all of those cases, but there is no definite timetable. So we do know they were scheduled to talk about the cases. We don't know whether they took any votes among themselves about whether to take the cases, and we don't know.
They could have said, "We'll talk. Let's talk about it another day."
Let's see what the 6th Circuit does before we talk about this, or let's see what the 5th Circuit does,
we're getting,
or the 11th Circuit.
We get the feeling that even liberals like Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg don't want to take these cases. They just want to let the lower court ruling stand. I mean,
I think that's too big a statement.
Okay.
I do. I think she's certainly on our side. She's performed same-sex marriages.
Yes.
So I think she would be happy to do whatever it takes to move this along.
Well, okay, we don't know. And, we're also awaiting a decision in the 7th Circuit, is it?
6th.
6th Circuit, which could go against us, in which case then you really have a conflict between the circuits.
Exactly. And that may be what the Supreme Court is waiting for, too. But they don't have to, and they don't have to take it even then, and all of this is up in the air. Meanwhile,
Hum has urged them to take the case. That includes me and Hoosiers United for Marriage, HUM. That's what they call themselves.
Yeah. And Attorney General Eric Holder has also come out clearly on our side this week. The first thing he did was resign as Attorney General.
Very long serving.
Yes, one of the longest serving, yes. And he's not out yet, because he said he'd stick around until the president got someone else confirmed, which could take a long time with this Congress.
And just so there's no confusion, Ann means out of the job, not out of the closet.
I know nothing about that. I am not outing the Attorney General of the United States.
He's now outgoing Attorney General Eric Holder.
On his way out the door, not the closet door, he did say several things, including that gay and lesbian equality is the civil rights issue of our day. Now,
he's also said there's,
I resist definitions like that, because, first of all, I don't think discrimination is hierarchical, and there's plenty to do in a lot of areas. And one of the things I most appreciate about him as Attorney General is his taking on these voting rights laws that have been passed in many states. I do not appreciate his standing up for all the wiretapping and national security invasion of privacy.
Nor for his failure to take on Wall Street, which could be the end of the republic, folks.
Exactly. But he has eventually been good on LGBT stuff. Don't forget, as many people have, that the Justice Department originally was against us on same-sex marriage, submitted horrible briefs in some...
horrible briefs, they can't win.
Well, they didn't.
They were throwing the cases.
Well, they were, doing what you accuse rightly Bloomberg of doing, quoting Leviticus and talking about the need for opposite-sex parents and stuff. But then they switched, and they did a great job of joining on our side in the DOMA cases. And Holder got up and condemned the Boy Scouts for being exclusionary, and has said now that he believes the administration will support any attempt to legalize same-sex marriage at the Supreme Court. Now, there are also LGBT groups that say, well, he should be submitting a brief now telling them to take these cases, but what he is instead implying is that when the cases are taken by the court, the Justice Department will chime in on our side. Okay.
Now, going back to Ruth Bader Ginsburg for a second, she said, we're a little concerned about her because her health has not always been great.
Yes.
And we're worried that if she lingers on into a Republican administration, we'll get somebody horrible. But she says if she retired now, Obama could not get a justice like her confirmed.
It's true.
Now, he got, Sotomayor and Kagan. Those are fairly liberal justices.
Yes, but not necessarily as liberal as her, actually. But although they're developing as people do on the court. But yeah, I agree with her. I think he'd have a terrible time getting anyone confirmed. I think he's going to have a terrible time getting an attorney general confirmed.
Right.
There is some talk that there's a lesbian candidate for attorney general.
Janet Napolitano. Well, that's somebody who's being discussed. She's a lesbian, isn't she?
Yes, but a closet case.
Oh, okay.
No, there is an out lesbian, Jenny, I can't read my own writing, Durhan, I think.
Jenny.
From Seattle. She was the U.S. Attorney in Seattle. She just resigned there, and she did some great work, especially on things like the operations of the police in Seattle as the U.S. Attorney.
Maybe he could appoint Michelle Bachmann. She's coming around on. Actually, she was asked at the Values Summit,
Values Voters Summit,
which was a lot of horrible things that we're not going to probably go into here. But she was asked about same-sex marriage. And she said that's boring.
She said it's not an issue anymore.
In elections. That's what she said.
Okay, to Mike Signorelli, who was interviewing her there. But Tony Perkins and the whole crowd that run the thing were again accusing us of being responsible for everything wrong with the human race.
And speaking of all these court cases against same-sex marriage, the one who defended it in New York and other places is Paul Clement. The lawyer.
Defended the Defense of Marriage Act.
Yes, defended the bad laws, right-wing lawyer. And I saw him on the Frontline special about the crisis in concussions in the National Football League, in football in general. And he was the lawyer for the NFL defending them on that.
Oh, okay. Now, in other court cases around marriage, the Gay and Lesbian Advocates and Defenders, the Boston legal firm, is suing the Social Security Administration because they have refused to give any benefits to a lesbian widow.
In Rhode Island.
Yeah.
Now, they had married in Massachusetts, and they were married. And what the Social Security Administration is saying, well, but Rhode Island didn't have same-sex marriage until a couple years later. Even though GLAAD, in this case, is saying Rhode Island would have recognized the marriage because Rhode Island was doing some of that, recognizing without passing the law. So they're going after Walmart.
No, they're going after.
I'm sorry, but they are also going after
Social
Walmart.
Security.
Social Security. Should I go to the Walmart story?
Sure.
Well, they're also the same group, Gay and Lesbian Advocates and Defenders, is suing Walmart at the EEOC for denying spousal benefits to the wife of a female employee from Swansea, Massachusetts. This is for when the employee worked there from 2006 to 2012. Walmart only changed their policy this year in terms of giving spousal benefits to same-sex couples, but the couple had racked up $100,000 in medical bills as the spouse had ovarian cancer.
Yeah, this whole complicated thing of companies self-insuring, and then who controls the discrimination laws in that situation. Is it the federal government? Is it the state laws? And it's the federal system of ERISA. And while the Defense of Marriage Act was still in place, companies would say, if they were subject to federal laws on insurance, we're not allowed to recognize your same-sex marriage, and therefore we're not including your legally married spouse, because the state has legalized the marriage, in your health benefits. So Walmart had a self-insured system. When DOMA was struck down, then they eventually changed their policies, but not in time to save these women $100,000 in medical bills. Now, interestingly, in Washington state, a federal judge has just ruled that a married gay couple can sue the BNSF Railway for sex discrimination for refusing health benefits. The railway also was federally insured and was saying we don't have to do this. But the court had a different interpretation and said, this is sex discrimination. It's not about same-sex marriage. They are a legally married couple. If you had another legally married couple that was opposite sex, you would give them the benefit. So your discrimination is not on the basis of same-sex marriage. It's on the basis of sex discrimination.
Well, folks, sex discrimination is, I think, our best bet for getting rights across this country, because that's what as we've been telling you.
Yes.
Transgender people, it's already been interpreted by the EEOC that sex discrimination, that discrimination against people who are transgender is sex discrimination, and we have one good big federal court decision that says discrimination against a gay man was sex discrimination in the city of Washington.
And the EEOC is now trying to build on this record. They, this week, sued a funeral home in Michigan and an eye clinic in Florida for sex discrimination against transgender women, transitioning employees. And these are the first EEOC lawsuits brought under the Civil Rights Act of 1964, charging sex discrimination in cases where companies are alleged to have discriminated against employees who were transitioning their gender.
That's very big.
Yeah.
Going back to marriage news, an interesting case in Pennsylvania. In Montgomery County, they married 200 couples in 2013 before the legal wrangling was over about same-sex marriage there.
It was civil disobedience by the county clerk who decided that same-sex marriage should be legal, and so he started handing out marriage licenses.
Many of those couples got married officially again in the spring when the cases were settled. 27, though, sued to be recognized, and they will be in a settlement, but their anniversaries will be moved to May 20th, 2014. You all get the same anniversary. 82 of these marriages are still in dispute.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And in Louisiana, we told you about the state court last week that had ruled for same-sex marriage in contravention to the federal court that ruled against it. But that ruling for marriage has been stayed, as it has in lots of other states.
And the Attorney General has asked the state Supreme Court to reverse it.
Right.
In Arkansas, the Catholic bishop there, Anthony Taylor, in his brief to the Arkansas Supreme Court in the same-sex marriage case, warned that we're on the slippery slope to legalized incest. But who am I to judge?
And in the midst of all this turmoil over marriage, and particularly as the Supreme Court is now really, literally deciding whether or not to take these cases, Freedom to Marry, Evan Wolfson's organization here, has put together a television ad that they are now airing on the Sunday talk shows in Washington, D.C., and on cable systems around the country in an effort to influence public opinion, and specifically the Supreme Court, I think, and legislators. But I think that's why you run it in D.C., to influence the Supreme Court. So here's Freedom to Marry's new TV spot.
One nation, indivisible, except if you're gay. In 19 states, gay couples and their children share in the protections that only the freedom to marry provides. In the others, they are banned from marrying. They're taxed unfairly, denied Social Security and parenting rights, and can lose a family home when their loved one dies. Every day of denial means real harms to real families. It's time to end marriage discrimination.
Hello. Well, yes, and that seems to be having some effect because we have reached a tipping point. In Utah, there's a new poll out that says 49% of Utahns support same-sex marriage and 48% are opposed.
Well, here's the indicator for me. Andy Rooney's gay grandson got married. Andy Rooney was a terrible homophobe. I once came across an advertising...
well, he was suspended for it at one point.
Well, and for racist remarks, too. And there were those who thought that it was the racist remarks that were more the tipping point for getting him suspended, and some criticism of CBS for whether they were, you know, more upset about that. And he, of course, denied the racist remarks.
He denied being anti-gay.
Well... He's
got a gay grandson, after all.
I came across a big glossy advertising brochure for Acura cars once, years and years ago, that was a whole essay by Andy Rooney about the horrors of homosexuality. It was shocking. And this was shortly after I had left CBS, where I'd been working, and I was in the building, and I'd seen this, and I took an interoffice envelope and a piece of paper, and I wrote him a note saying,
"Did you sign your name?"
Absolutely. You
fearless.
know, former,
she is fearless.
Former morning news producer. I used to respect you. I've seen this. You're a pig. Blah blah blah. No answer. But I was quite satisfied to be able to slip something into the interoffice mail, which would have given him a big surprise when he opened it. Right. But he was horrible on gay people.
Yep.
So congratulations to his grandson on your marriage. All right.
He married a Republican.
Yes, he did, and he's a Democrat. They work for Congress or agencies in D.C., and one's a Republican and one's a Democrat, and they got married.
Can't we all get along?
Good luck with that. All right. In California, there are a lot of laws being passed and signed and whatever. And
by Jerry Brown.
Jerry Brown has just signed 4 new ones.
One of them requires public utility companies to extend opportunities to certified LGBT-owned businesses, as they do from those with ethnic minorities, women, disabled veterans, that kind of stuff. You know, it's very funny. When we started working on LGBT rights, we said, well, we don't need any affirmative action. We don't want everybody surveyed about who they are, everything. We just want you to leave us alone. But now we're going for some of the
well, I think as with other categories like race or ethnicity or whatever, or gender, if you can prove that you are historically discriminated against and not getting those contracts because of who you are, then you do need a little affirmative action. And there's a new survey out, new study out this week by the Center for American Progress and the Movement Advancement Project, which is just the latest in a long line of these surveys that, in fact, talk about LGBT people having lower incomes and living more in poverty because of the discrimination.
Here's some of the data. While 21% of LGBT people make less than $12,000 a year, 17% of heterosexuals do. 15% of transgender people make less than $10,000 a year versus 4% of all Americans. And same-sex couples with kids fare much better in states with same-sex marriage, but you know, there are a lot of other factors involved in those states.
There are, but that is a very specific one. When you sanction people positively, when you legitimize people's relationships, then you do raise their standard of living, and that is one of the reasons to end discrimination legally and socially.
Anyway, back to Jerry Brown. He also signed a bill that, by the way, they passed 100 pro-LGBT bills in this state since they got started on doing this. Anyway, this also curtails the gay panic defense in a criminal trial and the trans panic defense. It can't be used to reduce a charge or avoid conviction or to avoid an assault charge. Look, in the old days, all you had to do if you committed a crime against a gay person was say, well, he came on to me. And then the jury would say, oh, my God, no wonder you hit him. Right. And that was it, and you won.
And that's the gay panic defense.
That has changed. I certainly wouldn't want to eliminate, if someone was genuinely an unhinged person who could prove diminished capacity, I wouldn't want to stop them from pitching that as their defense if they do have diminished capacity.
But the point is that you build a defense on diminished capacity.
Yes.
You don't build a defense on
gay panic.
Specifically gay panic.
Can't do it in California.
Yeah, so it's like conversion therapy. You know, you don't. There are certain things you don't want to allow because they are discriminatory. They're not valid.
Okay.
And they've also outlawed the use of condoms as evidence alone of sex workers. They are going to train health workers on LGBT and intersex issues. Also, the aforementioned Janet Napolitano, who is now the president of the University of California, has agreed with the recommendations of a study commission that the university will now correct the names of transgender students, faculty, whatever, on their records.
They can use their preferred names.
Yep.
And they've converted single-stall restrooms into gender-neutral ones,
yep,
rather than men's and women's rooms. I think this should be done everywhere. If you've got a single, I don't know how you feel about this, the differences between men and women using restrooms and all that kind of stuff, but if it's a single room in a restaurant here at Manhattan Neighborhood Network or wherever, you don't need, just put restroom 1, restroom 2 on the door. Why put men and women? Because you see, there are some women who won't use the men's room and men who won't use the women's room, even though it's single serve. We are not that way, but
one has only to remember.
I get glared at sometimes when I use a women's single serve room when the men's room is tied up at a restaurant.
Most of us grew up in families that contained people of more than one gender and used the bathroom.
Yes. Maybe there's some kind of a law about it in New York or something about if you have two, you must label one men and one women, but that leaves a lot of people out.
Well, anyway, Equality California, the statewide civil rights group there, has been so successful in passing so many of these laws that they have decided to adjust their focus a little.
To take over the universe.
Well, they've stated a new mission. They will fight discrimination everywhere. Well, okay. Well, you've been very successful in California.
If I were running a statewide organization, I'd want to see what they're drinking over there, that they're so successful, and learn from them. I'm kind of embarrassed as a New Yorker that we don't do better.
Well, we don't have the legislature they have either. We have a really rotten, worst in the nation legislature, and so they've gotten a lot more cooperation from their Senate and Assembly to get things passed.
And speaking of New York, in New York City, the Alliance Defending Freedom, which is the right-wing answer to the ACLU, they are appealing to the United States Supreme Court to overturn a federal appeals court decision upholding the ban on regular worship in public schools, even though Mayor de Blasio, who has no respect for the separation of church and state, I hate to say that about you, Bill, but why don't you come on and tell us where you have stood up for the separation of church and state, doesn't enforce the ban, which was part of the one of the good things that Bloomberg did or tried to do. But this right winger who is defending this, this law, this case, said that it was the LGBT community that showed up to try to crush the churches in New York.
If only. And I say that semi-facetiously. There's a lot of good work done in the name of religion. I'm not out to crush reasonable religions, but I'm certainly not sitting still for this.
We are for religious freedom.
Absolutely.
And you are, I'm not trying to be condescending, but you're a lot better off when you don't entangle yourselves with the state. And freedom of religion does not mean free space in public schools.
We're also for freedom of the internet, and it's a little surprising to still see stories of, well, aside from what they're doing in China, that there is an in-flight Wi-Fi service, GoGo, that is blocking gay sites on airplanes.
And there's another one called WebRoot that does that. So there are 13 members of Congress and 20 organizations, including the ACLU, wrote to the FCC, Federal Communications Commission, asking them to ensure that software used at federally funded schools and libraries does not prevent access to LGBT resources.
And they may have to start writing to Facebook, which is still refusing to allow people to choose their own names for their Facebook profiles. There was a demonstration at San Francisco City Hall this week, but the fight continues, and there is a movement among some LGBT people offended by Facebook's refusal to allow particularly drag performers in San Francisco to have an online presence on Facebook that uses that performance persona to go to a different service, to ditch Facebook and go to this new thing called ELLO.
Go ahead.
ELLO, like hello without the H.
It's like a Cockney way of saying hello.
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 But you have to be invited onto that, and it's sort of fledgling.
Well, the other thing is, if you're forced to use your real name and you're in an anti-gay country, you are totally restricted in what you can post at that point about anything.
And you can be hunted down and arrested.
Speaking of, well, we get to some of that in international news.
Yep.
Idaho Senator Wide Stance Larry Craig was ordered by a federal judge to repay the United States Treasury $242,000 for improperly using campaign funds to try to have his guilty plea in that restroom case overturned. That is one expensive toilet tryst, Larry. We said he was, it was outrageous that there were cops being sent into restrooms to try to trap people.
Absolutely.
This way. So, but Larry never owned his gayness.
Well, not that we know of.
He never did, not publicly.
Yes.
He denied being gay.
And Fred Karger has filed another complaint in California against the National Organization for Marriage. They have put a lot of money into trying to get a ballot measure to stop school children from getting education on LGBT issues, and they did not come clean about their donors and didn't file the necessary forms, and so Fred is going after them.
Fred is a pit bull when it comes to NOM, thank goodness.
Love it.
Staying in California, we forgot to mention that Jerry Brown also signed a bill ensuring that death certificates reflect an individual's expressed gender identity.
Hopscotching the country, in Tampa, Florida, Hillsborough County has just passed an equal rights ordinance that includes LGBT.
The Maryland law banning discrimination based on gender identity and expression went into effect this week.
In Dallas, the city council has added gender identity and expression non-discrimination clause for its city employees.
In Queens, New York, Ann Northrup and Andy Hum are speaking on Monday at 7:30, October 6th. We have a little chyron about this. At the Lesbian and Gay Democratic Club of Queens, we are the guests of out council member Danny Drum at St. Mark's Church in Jackson Heights. If you are on our email list, I will give you even more details about how you could witness one of our rare personal appearances.
Rare? We're available all the time. Bill Clinton is making a personal appearance at the Human Rights Campaign National Dinner on October 25th in D.C., already sold out to 3,000 people.
Well, they're making a big deal about this, but
ridiculous.
I mean, he spoke at the Empire State Pride agenda 10 or 12
He
more
spoke
years
at the
ago.
HRC dinner in 1997, a year after he signed DOMA and Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
He's trying to prop up Hillary.
It's all about Hillary.
Whose gay credentials are a little shaky.
Well, here's what's going to happen. Ann's prediction. This is not rocket science.
Okay.
Bill speaks this year. Hillary speaks next year.
Yeah?
Absolutely, as part of that. She doesn't wait until 2016.
What about...
She speaks in 2015.
What about Chelsea, though?
The kid will be speaking.
Charlotte. Princess Charlotte.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Not Westboro, but the Westwood Baptist Church in Louisiana, banned an Alcoholics Anonymous group because they worry that accommodating one outside group would compel them to allow same-sex weddings.
Ridiculous. Well, here's the kernel of truth in this. What was it? The Methodists or whatever in New Jersey were running a wedding service at a facility.
Well, no, it's a town. It's a town in Jersey. No, they have a gazebo.
Yes.
Something like that in the center of the town that people used for all kinds of public purposes.
Yes.
And because they rented it out to outside groups.
And it was owned by a religious organization.
And people wanted to do domestic partner ceremonies at the time.
Yeah. And they didn't want to let them, but because they did rent it out to others, the court said you have to be an equal opportunity renter.
Look, I mean, there's something called distinctly private, where you only use it for your own purposes. The New York Private Clubs Bill says you're not a distinctly private club if you do rent to outside groups.
Right.
So then you have to allow women members and things like that,
right.
And others.
But I doubt that the fact that the church is a meeting place for AA groups would force them to conduct same-sex weddings.
On the other hand, the National Catholic Reporter did a study on this and found that this year, 17 LGBT U.S. church employees were fired for sexual orientation this year, and 40 since 2008 based on, they include other factors: sexual orientation, marital status, pregnancy, or personal views on homosexuality.
Yes, people who were supportive of gay people have been fired.
You know, in California, when they, back in the 70s, when Harvey Milk was working on this and successfully fought it, the Proposition 6 was not just to ban gay teachers from the California schools, but anybody who supported gay rights.
And those are the kinds of laws that are happening in Russia and around the world now, too. Senator Brad Hoylman of New York has asked New York State Controller Tom DiNapoli to audit the NYPD and the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services on their enforcement of the LGBT hate crimes laws, and found that there's no confidence in their reporting of what crimes have been reported. Or their ability to analyze what's been reported to them, or to make any plan to try to undercut the amount of anti-LGBT hate crimes that are happening. So these, the NYPD and the Division of Criminal Justice Services have agreed to do something about that, but I have no confidence in that. Meanwhile, in Bushwick, Brooklyn, 3 people were arrested for harassing and shooting at 3 gay men, one in drag, and they hit the guy in drag. But they've been arrested and will be prosecuted for that. And
in Minneapolis, at a popular gay bar called the Saloon, a man named Wayne Obergard,
43 years old,
last Thursday, started harassing customers with anti-gay slurs and then started shooting them with
inside the bar
with a BB gun, injuring one in the leg, drawing blood. And then ran. He was nabbed by the bar's security guard, and police did arrest him.
Yeah.
And in Springfield, Missouri, the City Council will vote on October 27th on adding a provision banning discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. It's the national headquarters, the town is, for a city, for the Assemblies of God. So apparently it exempts a lot of religious businesses, though it's not clear how. We're trying to get clarification on that.
The National Association of Basketball Coaches, which is men's high school and college coaches. I don't know why they have an association of men's high school and college coaches, but they have adopted a sexual orientation non-discrimination policy, not a gender identity and expression non-discrimination policy, but this is high school and college men's basketball coaches. And there were rallies this week in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, Bucks County, where the attackers came from, of the couple that was attacked in Philadelphia.
In Center City, Philadelphia.
And also a rally in support of the kid who's being prosecuted for desecrating the statue of Jesus. But a lot of haters showed up at that, and there was a real confrontation there. Anyway.
Well, there was also a big demonstration. Turning to international news, there was a big demonstration. We told you last week that in Coahuila, Mexico, which is a state right across the border there, that they legalized same-sex marriage. Actually, it was by a 19-1 vote in the legislature. So in Saltillo, 30,000 people demonstrated against same-sex marriage as a result.
It's, the churches bring out the crowds. It's not unlike in the Bronx when State Senator Ruben Diaz puts together busloads of people.
Okay.
All right. In Russia, a constitutional court has upheld the no gay propaganda to minors law as appropriate, not homophobic, all about protecting minors. So Nikolai Alexeyev and two others, gay activists who sued against the law, have been found guilty of violating it and have been fined about $100 each.
In Egypt, Grindr is actually warning its users about how police are finding them with social media. Police pose as LGBT to entrap people using social media. This past week, 6 were accused of homosexuality based on Facebook posts there.
We've been waiting for a vote in the UN Human Rights Council on an LGBT rights resolution promising to work against discrimination and violence against LGBT people. The council took its vote. They passed the resolution 25-14 with 7 abstentions.
Which is a better vote than we got in 2011 on a gay rights
The
thing.
resolution is regarded as a little weak, but it does affirm LGBT rights by calling for a report on combating human rights violations.
And I don't want to stereotype anybody, but you may be surprised at some of the votes that we got. We got Cuba, Estonia, the Philippines, Romania, and Vietnam.
And South Africa, which we'd been worried about.
Exactly. But those voting against were mostly African and Muslim nations and the Russian Federation.
Yes.
China and India abstained.
And the Arabic and Islamic nations complained that passing this resolution was an insult to their cultures and that they were highly offended by this. And not all African nations voted against it, in addition to South Africa voting for it. Congo, Sierra Leone, Namibia all abstained, as did Kazakhstan.
Okay. We've told you about problems in the Caribbean with homophobia. So the travel industry representatives there met with representatives of the Caribbean LGBT community to discuss ways to support their efforts. And the U.S. State Department participated in the meeting. The advocates there do not want boycotts of their nations. They think this antagonizes, makes things worse. But they want some kind of engagement between tourists and advocates.
Well, yes, and they want major hotels and cruise lines to hold LGBT events to try to push along these countries, which depend on tourism and the industry for a lot of their income, to the countries to feel that if they want to keep that tourist industry, they have to be friendly to LGBT people, too. But my favorite quote that came out of this meeting was a straight guy who worked for Celebrity Cruise Lines after hearing the testimony from the LGBT activists in these countries about all the killings, the attacks, the discrimination, the anti-gay laws, said, I was just horrified. I had no idea.
How about reading the papers? How about watching Gayusa? How about watching The Soup? Come on.
In Jakarta, Indonesia, the university there, the University of Sanata Dharma, canceled a seminar on LGBT issues after violent threats by the Islamic People's Forum.
Wow. In Belgrade, though, and I think we have a picture of this, they had their Pride March. It came off without a major incident under police protection. The U.S. Ambassador Michael Kirby and Belgrade Mayor Sinisa Mali joined in. There were 50 young male nationalists who threw rocks at the police as a protest, and there were 5,000 protesters who were separated, led by priests.
They protested the night before, and the 50 thugs were kept at some distance. But 1,000 LGBT people and their supporters showed up for this march, and you know, they've had previous marches destroyed by violence or canceled, so this was really the first successful one.
All right. In the United Kingdom, the Observer did a big sex survey online, but they weighted the survey towards, population distribution. And they found that 8% of people say that they're gay or bisexual, 21% in the 16 to 24 age group, 16% say they've had same-sex relations, 22% of 16 to 24-year-olds, and 26% of 26 to 34-year-olds. So, you know, that's more than we've seen in the United States surveys.
In Banda Aceh, Indonesia, they have passed a new law. If you are discovered to be homosexual, you will get 100 public lashes with a cane.
Women guilty of rubbing up against each other for sexual pleasure also face caning.
As do those committing adultery, gambling.
But they dropped stoning for adultery.
Drinking alcohol.
Because the central government complained. So the human rights groups are trying to get the central government to complain about the anti-gay law as well.
Not showing up for Friday prayers, all subject to caning.
Indonesia was the only Southeast Asian nation to vote against this UN resolution that we talked about.
The International Olympic Committee announced that they are now going to ask upcoming host cities of the Olympics to sign a non-discrimination pledge. All Out was celebrating this, but the fact is that signing the pledge is signing on to Principle 6, which does not include sexual orientation or gender identity and expression explicitly. It's just a general statement of non-discrimination. So people are concerned that this is not nearly enough for the Olympics to do.
We want the Olympics to choose from the list of nations that voted for the UN resolution.
That'd be nice. And Russia has suspended an exchange program with the U.S. of high school students because one of their Russian students didn't go home from the U.S., and they're saying he was adopted by a U.S. gay couple. And the U.S. says, well, you know, we sometimes place these kids with all sorts of families as, you know, host families for exchange students, but no one's been adopting or kidnapping their kids.
All right.
AIDS news.
Well, the CDC reported this week that fewer than half of gay and bisexual men with HIV in the United States took anti-HIV medications. About a third, they say, don't even know they have it. And even those who are taking the drugs may not be adherent enough to contain the virus. 42% are said to have it under control. That's not enough.
Adequately treated. And, of course, those who are younger, those who are people of color are particularly untreated, not offered drugs by their doctors, not informed about treatment options or the need for treatment. In general in this country, new infections with HIV are dropping, but they continue to rise among young gay and bisexual men.
Right.
And a third of these men are never tested. Half of them don't discuss their sexual orientation with their doctor.
Well, you know, I mean, I listen, you know, the stories, the big health story this week is that Ebola has entered the United States, right? And Thomas Frieden, who we've had on the show, he's now head of the CDC.
Fought with on this show.
Yes. He says, I'm confident it'll be controlled because of the U.S. public health system.
Aye.
The same one that let HIV become a worldwide pandemic.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of...
I don't have a lot of confidence. On the other hand, in the Ebola story, a doctor in rural Liberia, out of desperation, gave the HIV drug Epivir to 15 patients who had, and all but 2 of them survived Ebola. The ones that survived got it early, within 5 days of diagnosis, and Dr. Fauci here in America says that he thinks the approach has merit.
as opposed to the Ebola patient in Dallas or in Texas who was sent home the first time he tried to go to the hospital. The New York City Department of Health is putting ads for pre-exposure prophylaxis, Truvada, on Grindr and Scruff.
Well, got to get it
Very
out there.
modern.
But of course, first you got to get people, you got to get people to acknowledge their risk. And a lot of people aren't even getting tested.
As we said, but at least they're reaching out to them where they are.
Yes.
All right, entertainment news. Everyone I know is very upset because the show Chicago Fire killed off their lesbian character, Shay. Okay, but there are a lot of lesbian and gay characters all over TV.
And a lot of transgender folks and others are upset at this new Amazon-streamed series Transparent with Jeffrey Tambor.
They're upset, really?
Because he's not being played by a transgender. The character is not being played by a transgender actor.
Got it. Okay. By the way,
I haven't seen it.
And someone else pointed out to me that the new Viola Davis show, How to Get Away with Murder, has a gay law student on it.
Now, I've told you how much I love the movie Pride, which is out there now, about gay activists in London aiding striking Welsh coal miners in 1984 and vice versa, and how I feared that they would take another great independent film and turn it into a stage musical. They're already doing it. It's already in the works with the same screenwriter we're working on, and Matthew Warchus, who's the director. Now, wait a minute. Here's some other things that are being made into musicals right now.
I can't wait too many minutes. We don't have many left.
Back to the Future, Groundhog Day, Calendar Girls, Bridget Jones, Bend It Like Beckham, and Finding Neverland, and Slumdog Millionaire, all being made into musicals.
Oh, boy.
All right.
Well, I saw a musical this week, Mighty Real, a fabulous Sylvester musical, which certainly does not come out of anything like that. The guy in the middle there is just Anthony Wayne, wrote this and is performing it. He doesn't look like Sylvester, but man, can he sing and dance and perform. It'll lift you right out of your seat. It lifted many people in the audience right out of their seats. The backup singers with him are playing his backup singers who turned out to be the Weather Girls who did It's Raining Men. So you get Mighty Real, you get It's Raining Men, you get a lot of disco and Motown hits. And I didn't even know that Sylvester was a part of the Cockettes in San Francisco.
We're all here to learn.
I'm ignorant. Anyway, it was extremely entertaining. I think it's scheduled to end this weekend. Mighty Real, a fabulous Sylvester musical at the theater at St. Clemens in New York. Maybe it'll be extended, but I would urge you to, for a fun little evening of 90 minutes of music, go to the theater of St. Clemens.
And you might as well go because you can't take it with you. We did see that, the old Kaufman and Hart War Horse. With James Earl Jones as the star, as Grandpa. And, we sat there, we had read good reviews before we went, but it's pretty corny for the first act. But then Julie Halston comes on in the second act.
Yes.
I won't spoil it, what she does, because she really livened things up.
Well, I think she stole a little part of the show there. Quite deliberately.
And the whole show kind of gained a little momentum and gelling.
Well,
it's very sweet, actually.
It
means to be very zany.
It's about it's a farce. It's a very eccentric family, and their young, beautiful daughter is going to marry a rich guy's son. And when the two families get together, then the show picks up, because then you have conflict, then you have hilarity.
1936.
It really works. Yeah.
Still playing.
Skip the first act. Just go to the theater.
The second act. You get the idea.
Second and third act. It is a three-act play.
And then I saw Love Letters, which is by A.R. Gurney. It's a Broadway show. There they are. Brian Dennehy and Mia Farrow. That's Brian on the right there. All it is an older man sitting next to an older woman reading letters back and forth, looking out at the audience from the time they were kids in the 1930s.
Kind of like us.
Well, it's
except news stories back and forth.
It's good when A.R. Gurney is the writer, and I must say it's very good when they're the actors.
The cast's going to change.
They're going to have Carol Burnett and other people, Alan Alda. It's a much more effective use of pauses than even Harold Pinter. And I thought it was quite touching.
Candice Bergen is going to be there with Alan Alda.
She is going to do it.
Yeah, and so in Philadelphia, there's a place called the Library Company that is an independent research library, and they have an interesting exhibit going on for the next couple of weeks called That's So Gay, Outing Early America. The bottom line on this is we know more than we know we know. Because they have great collections of stuff, and it's what we've been doing over the last many years is re-examining materials that were sort of hiding in plain sight and reinterpreting things, finding relationships that we had not looked at as relationships in pictures or writings. And that, Ken Burns is still trying to overlook in the Roosevelt series.
Oh, yeah, I think I owe you $1 about...
Do you?
Well, in the Roosevelt series, did they really, deal with Eleanor Roosevelt being a lesbian? They certainly had her relationship with Hick. Lorena Hickok, she certainly was in love with, they were both in love with each other. They sort of dealt with that, but they never said lesbian. I mean, they traveled around the country.
Well, they didn't have to say lesbian.
I'm
not sure you need me
I'm giving you $1.
But I might have to declare this.
Yes, you do. You have to declare all income.
Well, you don't have to declare any money at the Library Company in Philadelphia because the exhibit is free, and it deals with pre-1900 relationships, and history, so that is interesting. That's So Gay, Outing Early America at the Library Company in Philadelphia through October 17th.
All right, we're getting down towards the end here. There's a story I skipped because it's one of those tabloid stories that means to be exploitative. But it's about a transsexual in Britain, 30, Chelsea Attonley, who had gender reassignment surgery in about 2007, but now wants to go back to being Matthew again. Mm-hmm. And the tabs want to have a field day and say, oh, this is being paid for by the NHS and it's outrageous. But people do, have changes of heart and mind and figure that, and
it's happened here too.
There
was a famous case in LA.
They exploitatively, so the sports reporter.
Yeah.
But they quote Chelsea as saying that it's just too exhausting being a woman. Now, I'm sure that's taken out of context. I'm getting it, but
I doubt that's the real answer.
Exactly.
I think
people just,
I think living life as a transgender person in this time and place can be stressful.
Right.
So
even though attitudes have liberalized and all those other kinds of things, people still have conflicts.
All right. So if you do want to, if you're not totally bored by what you've heard so far and you want to hear more from us and hear it in person, we will be in Queens, Jackson Heights, Queens on Monday.
And at the MGM Grand on New Year's Eve. No, that's not true. We're not doing that.
Please, no.
Well, I've been to Las Vegas now, but,
Finally?
Yeah.
That was your first visit to Las Vegas?
Was.
Wow.
For the NAACP conference.
You would not want to be performing there.
No.
But we will be performing.
They never let you out. You got to do it for the rest of your life.
And we will be performing at the Democratic Club in Jackson Heights on Monday. Write to Andy Hum at AOL.com. He'll give you the details. And we will see you next week. Peace, Joel McHale.
7 train to 82nd Street.
Okay.